This video is sponsored by Squarespace. Disney has been dipping their toes into making more Tinkerbell content. First was a new middle grade series called the Bleak Watch Chronicles, which I made a video on. And now there's a YA romance called Wings of Starlight. It is a prequel to the fourth Tinkerbell movie, Secret of the Wings. It tells the love story of Queen Clarion, Queen of Pixie Hollow, and Lord Milori, the Lord of the Winter Season. Now, admittedly, I didn't grow up with the Tinkerbell movies. I grew up with the Disney Fairies books. So I don't have a ton of investment in this love story, and I've always had lots of criticisms of the Secret of the Wings movie specifically. But of course I was still going to read the book. It's Disney Fairies, come on. So I thought I could share my thoughts with you. Wings of Starlight is by Allison Saft. She has written a few popular fantasy books, none of which I have read, so she's new to me. And Allison Saft has a website and a newsletter where she has some information about Wings of Starlight, which was awesome. Very helpful for me. And hey, if you want a website, you can manage it with the sponsor of today's video, Squarespace. Squarespace allows you to build a beautiful website with no coding required. I don't even know what HTML stands for, and I don't need to. You can make a portfolio, blog, or even an online store. They have fully customizable templates that you can use by just dragging and dropping, and they have lots of design tools available. You can choose a custom color palette, Google and Typekit fonts, and different post types. Let's say you're a fantasy author who wants to blog. Squarespace allows you to schedule blog posts. You can let readers subscribe to an RSS feed, and you can organize your posts with both categories and tags. And if you want to monetize your writing, Squarespace lets you create paywalls and members-only content. If any of that sounds interesting to you, go to squarespace.com for a free trial, play around a little bit, and when you're ready to launch, go to squarespace.com/sarahserif to save 10% off your first purchase of a website or domain. So the book Wings of Starlight is connected to the Secret of the Wings movie. When they first started making the Tinkerbell movies, there was this idea that they would do a movie for each season. The first Tinkerbell movie is the spring movie. The Lost Treasure is autumn. The Great Fairy Rescue is summer. And The Secret of the Wings is winter. And then they did 2 more movies, so kind of dropped that theme. The world of the Tinkerbell movies is very much focused on the changing of the seasons. Fairies bring the change of the seasons to the mainland, which is the human world, and Pixie Hollow is divided up so there is a realm for each of the 4 seasons. This is not how it is in the books, but I'm choosing not to acknowledge that for this video. As a kid, I think I watched the first Tinkerbell movie, like it must have aired on Disney Channel or something, and I was pretty into it. I had a book that was a tie-in to that first movie. I still have it, because I still have all of my Tinkerbell books. But I think after that movie, I fell off, because I don't think I had watched any of the subsequent movies until like 2 years ago. But I remember seeing ads for Secret of the Wings and being very annoyed, because this movie does a lot of retconning. I think they came up with an idea like, hey, wouldn't this be fun for a Tinkerbell movie? And then changed everything about the lore to make that idea work, as opposed to working within the confines of the lore that they had created for the movies, which is already different from the lore for the books. The premise of Secret of the Wings is that Tinkerbell has a twin sister, which the idea of fairies having twins is not a completely new concept. Fairies are born of a baby's first laugh, and sometimes that laugh is just so big and powerful that it breaks up into multiple fairies. In the Disney Fairies book, Fira and the Full Moon, there are fairy triplets. My criticism of this as a kid was that we would have known if she had a twin. The fairies arrive together. So now we're saying not only does Tinkerbell have a twin, but there's a separated at birth situation going on. And the writers knew that they needed a justification as to why we didn't know about Tinkerbell's twin sister. So their explanation is that Tinkerbell's sister is a winter fairy, and fairies from the other seasons, the warm seasons, can't enter winter. It's too cold and it'll freeze their wings, and then they will never be able to fly again. And the warm seasons are too warm for the winter fairies. It'll melt their wings, I guess. So Tinkerbell's sister accidentally arrived in winter, and she's been there this whole time, and they didn't know about each other. But winter did not previously work like that. In the first Tinkerbell movie, each of the 4 seasons has a minister, and we briefly meet the winter minister. She has a whole 2-page spread in that book I mentioned. We see fairies fly through winter, and in Tinkerbell video games, like Pixie Hollow Online and the DS game, your fairy character can visit winter. So they just fully changed it, and I guess they thought that kids wouldn't notice or care, but I noticed, and I care a lot, clearly. So in The Secret of the Wings movie, Tinkerbell and her sister find out about each other, and they start visiting each other in secret, because it is forbidden for warm fairies and winter fairies to cross into each other's realms. And we learn why it's forbidden. It's not just because it's dangerous, but it's also because of Queen Clarion's tragic past. Queen Clarion and the Lord of Winter, whose name is Milori, had a star-crossed romance. And somehow, over the course of their romance and them visiting each other, Milori's wing was injured. He lost part of his wing due to the change in temperatures, and now he can never fly again. But in Secret of the Wings, we find a solution to this temperature problem. If you put frost over a warm weather fairy's wings, then they can enter winter. It's compared to like a flower in winter. It has frost on it and you think it's dead, but actually it's just like hibernating. So the frost protects the fairy's wings and they're able to enter winter. I'd argue we didn't super need that solution because warm weather fairies going into winter can just put a coat over their wings and that seems to be fine. What we really needed was a solution for winter fairies coming into the warm seasons. And I think we're saying the frost thing works both ways, like it works for winter fairies too. Because in the 5th movie, The Pirate Fairy, we see winter fairies in the warm seasons. So presumably we put frost on their wings and now they're fine. I don't think I need to tell you that that's not how frost works. I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt, and I'm gonna say it's magic frost. But basically, because of this frost innovation, Queen Clarion and Lord Milori can now be together, and that's how we end their story in Secret of the Wings. So, Wings of Starlight is a prequel explaining how Clarion and Milori met, and what happened to Milori's wing. I, of course, was wondering how much freedom Allison Saft had to come up with this love story. Because when I've talked about Disney books in the past, it usually seems like Disney gives their writers a lot of free rein. And in a blog post, Allison Saft said, "At the very beginning of the process, my editor sent me a high-level concept, essentially the summary you'd read on a jacket of a book. I expanded that concept into a full scene-by-scene outline, and from there, we worked together closely to refine and develop the story. I had free rein to invent new lore and new characters, and I decided what would happen in each scene. But my editor gave me suggestions on how to improve each draft, the same as an editor of my original fiction would do." Which that is pretty much what I expected from what Gail Carson Levine and Melissa De La Cruz have said. Disney approaches you with a concept, and then you work together to sort of flesh it out. Meaning also, they have an author in mind, and they're approaching that author. They're not, like, holding auditions. And it makes sense to me that they approached Allison Saft based on her previous work and what this book is. It feels to me like Disney is trying to capitalize on romantasy and fairy romance books. So, what happens in Wings of Starlight? I'm so glad you asked. We open with Clarion, who is not yet a queen. She is a queen in training. And we occasionally refer to her as a princess, which is crazy to me. And there's a line about Clarion at some point in the book, in all of her 17 years, as in, like, she's 17. To be clear, fairies aren't born like babies. They arrive to Pixie Hollow as, like, a fully formed person. In the books, we go as far as to say that fairies arrive knowing their name, their talent, all of the, like, social etiquette in Pixie Hollow, where everything is, how to do things. I think they scaled that back a little bit for that first Tinkerbell movie. They wanted that scene of Tinkerbell arriving and having the talent choosing ceremony. But a fairy being 17 is not the same as a human being 17. I just think it's funny that this is, like, really YA. Like, she's literally a teenager. Clarion's coronation is coming up on the summer solstice, and we're in the beginning of summer right now. The current queen is Queen Elvina. I know it's Elvina. I can read the letters, but every time I read it, I think it says Elvira. So I have to really consciously think and say Elvina. Clarion is taking lessons from Elvina about how to use her queen magic and how to rule. And we get some new lore about the queens of Pixie Hollow. Apparently they have a unique talent called the governing talent. That's always been a problem with the Tinkerbell franchise, is you have some talents that are literally superpowers, like water bending and talking to animals. And you have some fairies who are I'm good at art. I can be the queen. It's supposed to be that what your talent is what you're most passionate about and interested in the whole wide world. And every fairy can do lots of generic magic, like making things fly. But your talent is your magic specialty. I know that, and I know that's what they're going for, but there is still a coolness gap between some of the fairies. So queens have a governing talent and vaguely defined governing magic. We also learn that queens emerge from a fallen star, so instead of being born of a laugh, they're born of a star. Elvina says that queens must be distant from their subjects. A queen does not belong amongst her subjects. It's not about helping individuals, it's about helping at scale. But Clarion doesn't really like that. She likes helping with small things. For example, there is an exhausted bumblebee who, overexerted herself and is lying on the ground, and Clarion brings the bee food and helps get it back to its hive. This is the type of thing that Elvina would not be into. While Clarion is helping this bee, the Minister of Summer comes to talk to her. They had, I guess, had a meeting, and Clarion was supposed to go home, and the Minister of Summer is like, "What are you still doing here?" The minister is named Aurelia and has dark skin, and at this point, I was like, hold on. The Minister of Summer in Tinkerbell did not have dark skin. None of the ministers have dark skin. Not a lot of racial diversity in the franchise in general. So we are far enough in the past that we have completely different ministers than we had in the Tinkerbell movie. Clarion then goes back to her room in the palace. The palace is in a hollow of the pixie dust tree trunk, and Clarion has to sneak back into her own room so Elvina doesn't find out that she was helping a bumblebee. Then we meet two new characters, Petra and Artemis. Artemis is Clarion's royal guard. She's very serious and stoic. And Petra is a tinker talent, and she is the crown's personal tinker. She's pretty anxious and frazzled, and she's apparently Clarion's oldest/only friend. And we learn that Artemis and Petra have crushes on each other. We get a line like, they've been pining for 10 years. Hell yeah, lesbians. Petra is covering for Clarion, because Artemis wants to check Clarion's room, and Petra knows that Clarion isn't back yet. But now Clarion's back in her room, so we're good on that. We also learn that Clarion can see the mountains of the winter woods from her bedroom, and no one from the warm seasons has visited winter in hundreds of years. From the warm, secluded safety of her bedroom, there was something so peaceful about it, and so terribly lonely, just like her. Then Clarion is whisked away to a meeting with Elvina, and it turns out that Clarion is really struggling with her governing talent magic. Elvina keeps telling her to be in control and emotionless and focused, but Clarion is still having trouble making anything happen. Elvina says that to be a good queen is to be as cold and remote as the star from which you were born, which is one of those things where a character says it, and you're like, that's so bonkers and obviously wrong. Then Elvina tells Clarion a vague legend about the winter woods. Apparently, the first ever queen of Pixie Hollow, Queen Titania, and the warden of the winter woods had some kind of disagreement that's been lost to time. And we reference some dark force that consumed the warden of the winter woods. The next day, Clarion has a meeting with the 3 seasonal ministers. The summer minister, Aurelia, who we already met. The autumn minister, Rowan. He's pale with auburn hair and is keen, agreeable, and occasionally prone to bouts of melancholy, which just made me think of the depression months in Twilight. Like September, October, November. Sometimes you're going through it. And the spring minister is Iris. She is very high energy with a warm complexion and black hair. So the season we're in right now is summer, and we're making preparations for autumn on the mainland. We're also making preparations for Clarion's coronation. But then a scout fairy crashes into the meeting. A monster has crossed over from winter into spring, and it looks like some sort of fox made out of shadows. Clarion is sent to her room. This is sort of a constant problem in this book. Alvina doesn't think that Clarion is ready / wants to keep her safe, so she's not allowed to be involved in anything that's going on. Which she's going to be queen pretty soon, so I don't think this is the greatest tactic. Clarion, of course, doesn't want to do nothing. She wants to go to the border between winter and spring to see if she can find the monster. Which, we said the monster crossed from winter into spring. I don't think it's still hanging out at the border. Also, going there alone without telling anybody doesn't seem like a great plan. But we have to somehow get Clarion to the border of winter. That's what happens when your two romantic leads are kind of geographically limited. We gotta get them at the same place at the same time, even if it's a little bit silly. So Clarion goes to the border, and I think what we're meant to understand is that this is the part of the border where you can cross over. There's a bridge between the seasons at this spot, and the bridge is a root of the pixie dust tree. The pixie dust tree is huge, and the roots span all across Pixie Hollow, and this pixie dust tree root bridge is what would allow you to cross from one realm into the other. So Clarion's at the border. There's nothing there, obviously. But then a winter sparrow man comes. And we're not saying he's hot in as many words, but we're definitely meant to understand that he is ethereal and very attractive. My bias here is that I am not into guys, so it's kind of hard for me to get into a romance from the perspective of a girl who's really into a guy. I can read from perspectives I don't relate to, but I feel like romance, more so than other genres, they're really expecting you to relate to this mindset. Clarion is initially scared that this random man came out of the woods. My apologies. I didn't mean to frighten you. His politeness surprised her even more than his sudden appearance had. You didn't, she said guardedly. Well, he replied, visibly taken aback. That's a relief. This sparrow man is named Milori, and he wishes to speak with the queen. And Clarion's like, well, I'm going to be the queen, but I'm not the queen yet. Can I take a message? And Milori's like, the warden of the Winter Woods seeks an audience with the queen. And Clarion's like, well, the queen isn't going to want to talk to him, but I'm the queen to be, and I will. And then she realizes, oh, he is the warden of the Winter Woods. Milori wants to warn her about the monster that has crossed over, and she's like, too late, it already came. What is this monster? What do you know about it? Your predecessor has not been forthcoming with you, he said, with a touch of bitterness. And Clarion thinks that's very rude, that he has suggested that Alvina knows things that she's not telling her. Which, come on, girl. He says that the monsters are only active at night, and he offers to wait at the border to meet with her to discuss the situation further. And Clarion's like, I have obligations during the day. I don't know if I can get away. So Milori says that for a week, he'll be at the border at sunset every day. So Clarion takes it under consideration, and on her way back to the palace, she visits Petra in Tinker's Nook, just to check that her friend is okay after that whole monster escaping thing. Petra can tell that Clarion is hiding something, but Clarion doesn't tell her what it is. Clarion's like, everything's fine. And Petra's like, oh god, it's really bad, isn't it? Clarion goes back to the palace, and Alvina is mad at her for not staying in her room. Clarion says she was checking on Petra, and she asks if the winter fairies are going to be okay. And Alvina is very dismissive. She's like, the Winter Woods is a dangerous, barren place crawling with monsters. They are used to it by now. So now we know that Alvina knew that there were monsters in the Winter Woods. The next day, Clarion meets with the Autumn Minister. He can tell that she's kind of off and nervous, and she asks if he ever doubted himself being a minister. And he says that she'll know what to do, and kind of implies that she shouldn't be worried so much about what Alvina's gonna think. But then, another monster attacks. This time it is a serpent that seems to be made out of smoke. Artemis summons more scout talents, and the monster starts attacking people with this venom that puts them to sleep. So these fairies are being rendered unconscious and like falling out of the sky. Clarion is almost able to summon her undefined governing talent magic. She's not trying to control it, she's just trying to protect people, and she summons this very bright magical glow, which the monster seems afraid of. But the monster is about to attack her, so Artemis pushes her out of the way, and that sort of stops her magic. The monster is gone, but now we have multiple fairies who have been put to sleep, including the Minister of Autumn. The fairies won't wake up, and the healing talents don't really know what to do. Clarion is taken back to the palace to talk to Alvina, and Alvina admits that she knows what these monsters are. They are called nightmares, and they put their victims into a nightmare-filled sleep. Clarion's like, hey, the monsters seem to be afraid of my magic. Maybe you and I can use our magic to fight them. But Alvina says that it's too dangerous for them to be involved. Later, Alvina has an assembly to update all the fairies. There's been a monster attack, the Minister of Autumn is out of commission, and there's no cure yet for the victims. She says that she is instating a curfew at sunset, and that she intends to tear down the bridges between winter and the warm seasons. Then monsters wouldn't be able to cross over. But obviously, fairies wouldn't be able to cross over either. Clarion doesn't like this plan. She doesn't think it's a good solution. She goes to talk to Petra about it, and Petra says that Alvina has already been talking to the Tinker Talents. You couldn't cut a root of the pixie dust tree with a normal blade. It's too magical and powerful. So the plan is to have the Tinker Talents make a blade infused with magic. Apparently the Winter Realm is still connected to the pixie dust tree through like other roots. So they'll still have pixie dust, they'll still have magic, but no one will be able to cross. Clarion wants to go update Milori on everything that's going on, and she knows that she won't be able to get around Artemis. So instead of trying to sneak around Artemis, she just asks for permission to go to the border. She's like, it's really important, I'm trying to save Pixie Hollow, can you lie to Alvina and cover for me? And Artemis agrees. So Clarion meets with Milori and updates him on the curfew and the attack and the plan to sever Winter from the rest of Pixie Hollow. And he tells her that the nightmares were imprisoned under a frozen lake, but the lake prison has been damaged over time, so nightmares have been able to escape. Milori says that there is a book in the Hall of Winter that might have some information about how to defeat the nightmares. But Milori and the Keeper, who's in charge of the books, can't read the book. And the Keeper speculates that the book can only be unlocked with governing talent magic. And Clarion's like, cool, bring me the book and I'll read it. And Milori's like, no, it's too big and fragile and heavy. I can't carry it to the border. So you're gonna have to come into Winter to read this book. And Clarion's like, okay, I guess I'll figure something out. So Clarion asks Petra to make her a coat that she can wear over her wings so she can cross into Winter. And Petra is initially like, what in the world are you doing? That's super dangerous. But because she's a good friend, she begrudgingly agrees to make this coat. She's also like, I'm not a sewing talent. Like, I'll figure it out, but it's not going to be great. Later, Clarion visits the border again, even though she doesn't have the coat yet. She just wants to talk to Milori. Clarion tells him that there is a coronation ball for her on the night of the next full moon, which is a week before her coronation. And then Milori is like, well, then we'll hold a ball that same night in your honor. And we talk a little bit about Milori. He doesn't know what talent he is. She thinks he could be a governing talent, but he wasn't born of a star. And he wasn't trained by the previous warden, like how Clarion is being trained by the queen. Milori arrived, the previous warden was already gone, and all he had was the warden's notes. And Clarion feels bad that he's so isolated and has no one to help him. Days later, Artemis brings Clarion a message from Petra. And the message just says, it's done. And Clarion's like, oh, Artemis, were you over visiting Petra? I didn't know you visited Tinker's Nook. Petra has made Clarion a coat and snowshoes. And Clarion thinks that the snowshoes look like badminton rackets. I don't think fairies know what those are, especially before Tinkerbell came and started using a bunch of human objects. Petra is very stressed out about this whole situation, and she asks Clarion to leave her out of it and to not tell her what she's doing. So Clarion goes to the border with her coat and her snowshoes, and Clarion is very nervous, so Milori helps to pull her across the border. They have to get to the Hall of Winter, but they can't fly because Clarion can't expose her wings to the cold. So they walk for part of the journey, and then for part of the journey, they take a sled. Very Hallmark movie. They make it to the Hall of Winter, and they meet the Keeper, who was a character in Secret of the Wings. And eventually they figure out that Clarion needs to touch the book with her bare hand. She is then able to read the book, and we get lots of lore. Hundreds of years ago, when the pixie dust tree was just a sapling, children's dreams would travel over to Pixie Hollow, not just children's laughs. And Pixie Hollow had dream talents, which is interesting because the Bleakwatch Chronicle book also had dream talents. The dream talents would spin the dreams into thread, and then weave that thread into the branches of the pixie dust tree. So children's hopes and wishes would be protecting the pixie dust tree. But the dream talents had to be very careful because there were also nightmares that would travel over to Pixie Hollow. The nightmares would burn away in the daylight, but one day, some of them escaped. These nightmares became monsters. They would attack fairies, and fairies would fall asleep, tormented by their worst fears. The dream talents decided that they needed to make a prison to hold these nightmares. And the Lord of Winter offered to have this prison in winter. Then it could be as far away from the pixie dust tree as possible. So then the dream talents imprisoned the nightmares. And at first, the nightmares were squabbling amongst themselves and fighting. Until finally, the oldest and most powerful nightmare united all of the other nightmares. Now they're no longer fighting each other. They're just in the prison, festering, waiting to escape. And years later, when the pixie dust tree was fully grown, dreams no longer traveled over to Pixie Hollow. The dreams were only needed for the pixie dust tree. Then dream talent fairies stopped arriving in Pixie Hollow because there was no need for them, until eventually there were no more dream talent fairies left. So now, this prison that was created centuries ago is deteriorating, and there are no more dream talent fairies left to fix it. Then Clarion, Milori, and the Keeper start speculating. We know that the nightmares are afraid of sunlight, and they're also afraid of Clarion's magic, which Clarion was born from a star, so perhaps her magic is sort of like sunlight or starlight. But Clarion's like, I still can't control my magic, so I'm not going to be able to defeat them with my magic. Then we learn that queens aren't just born from any star, they are born from a star that a child has wished upon. And so maybe that child wish energy gives Clarion some amount of dream magic. So they speculate that Clarion might be able to repair the broken prison. So Clarion's going to come back tomorrow, and her and Milori are going to visit the prison. The next day, Clarion visits the healers to see all of the fairies who have been affected by the nightmares. All of the fairies are still asleep, and the healing talents aren't any closer to waking them up. Alvina is also visiting the healers, and Clarion gets sort of impatient with her and snaps at her, which she's never done before. That night, Clarion visits Winter, and Milori has brought his pet snowy owl for them to ride. It'll be faster than walking, but Clarion is very nervous because birds of prey are known for eating fairies. This owl seems very chill, so we make it to the prison no problem. The prison is a frozen ice lake over this pit that has all the nightmares in it, and Clarion can see the cracks in the ice and also the cracks in the dream magic. She tries to repair the dream magic, but a nightmare snaps at her and scares her, and she falls to the ground. This breaks her connection with the magic, and then a nightmare escapes out of the prison. The nightmare scratches Clarion's arm. Milori calls for his owl to come and help them fight the nightmare, I don't know, and the nightmare escapes. Clarion feels bad that she didn't use her magic to defeat the nightmare while she had a chance, and Milori's basically like, don't be ridiculous, you could have died. He takes Clarion to a healer in Winter, and here there are way more victims of the nightmares. The healer has to cut Clarion's sleeve to access her arm, because she can't take off the coat, because then her wings would be exposed. So now, when she gets back, she's going to have to get the coat repaired before she can return to Winter. Clarion gets all stitched up, and her and Milori go back to the border. And Clarion's upset by the idea of not seeing him, so she offers to come and visit him at the border while she's waiting for the coat to be repaired. Later, Artemis and Clarion bring the coat to Petra's house, and Petra's like, "Is there blood on this coat? What are you doing?" And she makes Clarion explain what's going on. And at the end of it, Petra's like, "You're sneaking out to see a boy?" Which, like, she is trying to save Pixie Hollow. She is also sneaking out to see a boy, but, like, give Clarion a little bit of credit. It's not just because she has a crush. I also appreciated this line that's like, Petra was never really into sparrow men, so she didn't really get it. Same, girl. Petra agrees to fix the coat, but she is not happy about it. The next day, Clarion has a dress fitting for her coronation, and she also misses a meeting with the Minister of Summer. So the minister, like, shows up at her dress fitting, like, "Hey, I think you forgot about our meeting." I do think it's odd, because there are multiple conversations where Clarion is talking to someone, and they're like, "You seem stressed, you seem off." And Clarion admits that she's sort of stressed about the coronation and how everything's happening so fast. But I feel like she never says, "I'm also stressed about the monster situation," which I think would be a justified thing to say. That night, Clarion meets with Milori at the border, and they stay on their opposite sides. They discuss how she's really struggling using her magic. And he's like, "Well, it seems that you're having problems when you're trying to control it. So maybe just feel your magic and don't try and overthink it." So she tries using her magic, and she looks over at him, and he looks so in love with her. And Clarion's like, "Oh, I'm an idiot. I think he wants to kiss me." So they share their first kiss with their bodies on opposite sides of the border and their faces meeting in the middle. Then Clarion kind of freaks out after this kiss. She's worried that she's getting too attached and too involved with Milori, so she decides to stay away until her coat is fixed. A detail I really liked in this book is that the pixie dust tree kind of reacts to Clarion's emotions. So when Clarion is sitting in her bedroom, determined to not visit Milori, Artemis is like, "Hey, what's going on with you?" And Clarion's like, "Nothing, what do you mean?" And Artemis is like, "Well, the pixie dust tree is blooming flowers." So later, Clarion is summoned by Alvina, and Alvina tells her that Petra has made the magic blade. Petra made a blade hilt with no blade in it, with a sunstone in it. And on the summer solstice, when the sun is most powerful and the queen's magic is at its most powerful, they will be able to summon the starlight/sunlight magic, creating a magic blade that will be able to cut through the pixie dust tree root. And Clarion's like, there must be a better way than cutting off winter. And so to convince her, Alvina tells her another story. Apparently, back in the day, that first warden of the Winter Woods staged a rebellion against the queen. The details have been lost to time, but Alvina thinks that he was bitter about having to take care of this prison, and that the nightmares had a negative influence on him. So there's more things that Alvina didn't tell her. Clarion says that she won't do it, she won't wield the blade, and Alvina says that it's for the greater good. And Clarion's like, "I'll take that under consideration," and she storms out. That night, Clarion goes back to the border, her coat is fixed, and it's very awkward. Milori says that he thought that Clarion regretted the kiss, and Clarion's like, "No, I didn't regret it, but I did panic." Then she asks him if nightmares can influence fairies while they're awake, and Milori says no. And Clarion's like, "Well, Alvina thinks that the wardens are not to be trusted, so we have until the summer solstice to figure this out." They ride the owl to the ice prison again, and this time they are able to successfully reseal the prison. Then Milori takes Clarion to see a statue of the first ever Lord of Winter. The plaque on it says that it was commissioned by the Queen after his death, which means that the Queen and the Lord of Winter were on good terms even when he died, which means that there was never any rebellion. Milori thinks that over the centuries, the queens and the lords of winter just sort of drifted apart. Milori also says that he feels guilty because there were all of these wardens before him meant to contain the nightmares, and all of them succeeded until him. And Clarion's like, "That's not on you, this was kind of inevitable." Then Clarion says that she doesn't think that they can be together. Being with him makes her feel too vulnerable. And Milori's like, "Okay, if that's what you want, but I think that you should come to the winter ball that we're holding in your honor. I think all of the fairies in winter really want to meet you. And she knows it's a bad idea because she should be keeping her distance from him, but she agrees. So on the night of her coronation ball, she's going to have to sneak out to go to a different ball. Back in the warm seasons, there are no more nightmares escaping from winter. But also, none of the victims have woken up. So we thought we fixed the problem, but clearly we haven't. Then it's time for Clarion's coronation ball. At the ball, some of the scout talent fairies are being knighted for fighting the nightmares. But Artemis is not being knighted, even though she's a scout talent. Since she serves as guard for Queen Clarion, she's not allowed to do normal scout stuff. And I guess that time that she saved Clarion from a nightmare earlier is not enough to get her knighted. Clarion feels bad because she knows that Artemis wanted to do normal scout stuff. And then we get Artemis's backstory. Apparently, years ago, there was a hawk that had its sights set on Pixie Hollow. Artemis and another scout were fighting this hawk when the other scout ran out of pixie dust and fell out of the sky. Artemis rushed to catch her and save her, but in doing so, let the hawk escape. So, sort of as a demotion, she was made into a guard for the queen. And Clarion's like, don't feel guilty that you did that. I would have done the same thing. Then Petra shows up so that her and Clarion can do each other's makeup. Clarion's like, Artemis is off duty tonight. And Petra's like, really? And Clarion's like, I knew it. So she does Petra's makeup extra special for no reason in particular. Then later, at the ball, after there's been speeches and knighting and whatever, Clarion tries to sneak away. But Petra catches her. And Clarion's like, I'm trying to save Pixie Hollow. You made that blade for Elavina, but I'm trying to find another way. And Petra's like, you're going to visit Winter in a ball gown. You're not saving Pixie Hollow. You're going to visit your boyfriend. This is dangerous. It's gone too far. But Clarion leaves anyway. Clarion goes to the winter ball, and she has on this slap-together coat over her ball gown. And there's some definite tension between her and Milori, because they're trying not to be together, but they both obviously very much want to. The two of them fly on the owl to the ball. Everyone's so excited to see Clarion. She gets tons of gifts from people, and her and Milori dance together at the ball. And he's basically like, this is how it could be between the warm seasons and winter. We could make this work. Later, Clarion has to go back, so Milori takes her back to the border, and the two of them kiss again. But then, Elavina shows up. Petra and Artemis are behind her, and it becomes clear that Petra tattled on Clarion. Clarion and Elavina have this big fight, and Clarion's like, I'm trying to save everyone. Can you say the same for your plan? Then a winter scout shows up. Apparently, the nightmares have escaped again, and they have overrun the winter ball. Without a second thought, Milori and Clarion go to stop them. They get there, and it's a disaster. Tons of fairies have been incapacitated. There's way more nightmares than they've ever seen before. Clarion is about to be attacked by a nightmare when who shows up but Artemis and Petra. They are wearing the prototype coats that Petra made, and Petra has designed a new weapon. It shoots pixie dust-laced arrows, which helps defeat the nightmares. Petra's like, I've been working on this, not on the sword. The sword doesn't work. You told me that you didn't want to cut off winter and that you'd figure something out, and I am on your side. Meanwhile, all of the winter fairies are trying to shelter in the Hall of Winter. Milori is trying to fight the nightmares with his ice powers, and Clarion is trying to fight with whatever governing magic is. Once the sun comes out, all the nightmares will go away. But dawn is still a few hours off, and we're not going to make it. So the fairies agree to make a final stand. Artemis is attacked and injured, and Petra is put to sleep. I feel like I've maybe not been doing a great job of distinguishing between nightmares attacking you just physically, hitting you, and attacking with the venom that puts you to sleep. So Artemis is just hurt, but Petra is asleep. Then Clarion does a giant blast that uses up all of her magic and gets rid of all of the nightmares. But now she's on the brink of death. She has to get back to the warm seasons and the healers. Milori can take her to the border, but no one's going to be waiting for them at the border because they know that there was an attack. Milori flies her to the border on the owl, and he's talking to her, trying to keep her awake. He says, I saw your star fall. I didn't know that that's what it was at the time, but I made a wish on your star. I wished for a better future for Pixie Hollow. And Clarion's basically like, I'm gonna make that wish come true. There's no one waiting at the border, and Clarion desperately needs help, so Milori flies the owl over the border into the warm seasons. He takes her to the healers, and his wings are like melting, but he doesn't want to leave until he has confirmation that she's gonna be okay. Then it turns out Elvina is there visiting the healers, and she's shocked to see Milori in the warm seasons. She's like, it's gonna be okay. You need to leave right now. And Milori's like, okay, you also need to send healers to the border because Artemis and Petra are in winter and they're injured. So now Elvina is very on board with Milori. Milori leaves, and Clarion does get better over the next few days. Elvina comes to talk to her and is like, I can't help with the nightmares. My power is waning. After your coronation, I will return to the stars like all of the queens before me. So I don't have enough power left in me. But I was wrong to be so distant and emotionless and to tell you to try to do that too. Which, Elvina, if you knew you were gonna die after her coronation, you should have been telling her everything. This is how information gets lost. So Clarion, of course, is like, it's all up to me. I'm feeling better. I'm gonna escape the healers and go defeat the nightmares. She uses the last piece of governing talent magic that she hasn't mastered yet, which is teleportation. You know, the branches of government magic. Judicial, legislative, teleportation. So she makes it out of there, she gets to the border, she has her coat with her, and she whistles for the owl to come get her. Her and the owl fly to the frozen lake prison, and she jumps into the void underneath the frozen lake. At first, the nightmares are making her see things, so she thinks that she sees Milori, the pixie dust tree rotting, all of her friends mad at her for failing. Before, all of the nightmares were just like generic creatures. I think because they were lesser nightmares, not as powerful, this is like the queen nightmare. So she's able to do personalized fears. But just in time, the actual Milori shows up and snaps her out of it, and Clarion is able to use her governing talent magic to defeat the queen nightmare. Afterwards, Clarion is like, how did you know to come here? And Milori is like, well, you stole my owl. I knew it was you, and I knew where you'd go. Then Clarion is like, well, there's no more nightmares to guard, so you're not the warden of winter anymore. I'm going to make you the lord of winter, and you're going to serve on my court. And then she sees that his wing is broken, and she's shocked that he sacrificed himself for her like that. You didn't even hesitate. Why? I think you know why, Clarion. And we get the line that's been in a lot of the promotional material, that love like theirs was ruinous. Clarion decides that this is too dangerous and no one should cross the border again. So she's going to make a proclamation that it's forbidden. Milori agrees to it, and they kiss one more time. Clarion goes back across the border into the warm seasons and back to her bedroom, where she cries in Elvina's arms. Then we get word from the healers that all of the victims are waking up, so defeating all of the nightmares broke the spell. Clarion visits the healers. She sees Artemis, who has an injured leg and is walking with a cane. Clarion offers that Artemis can return to the Scouts if she wants, and not be her guard anymore. And Artemis is like, no, I think I see the value in being your guard. I don't see it as a demotion anymore. I want to stay with you and keep you safe. Then Petra wakes up, and Artemis and Petra kiss. Hell yeah. Finally, the Minister of Autumn wakes up, and he's like, see, Clarion, you didn't need to doubt yourself. You had it handled. Clarion decides to hold her coronation at the border so that everyone from all of the realms can come and see. At her coronation, she gives a speech about uniting the realms and promoting Milori to the Lord of Winter, and that she is making it forbidden to cross into winter. So it's like we're kind of uniting the realms, you know? Like we're on good terms now, which is an improvement, but I wouldn't say that this necessarily feels united, you know? After the coronation, they have a big party, and at the end of the night, Clarion meets with Milori at the border. They share a final kiss, and Clarion says, remember to be free, Milori. No more haunting this border like a ghost. And Clarion looks back at winter, which would be calling her home for the rest of her long life. The end. I thought thought it was good. I'd recommend it, especially if you were into this movie as a kid, whereas I only watched it like 2 years ago, so I don't necessarily have nostalgia for it. That probably makes it more fun. My nostalgia's different. I'd freak out if a book had Ronnie or Bess in it, or like a Vidya origin story. But I think this book works even if you aren't that familiar with Pixie Hollow. I wouldn't say there's like a ton of references that you need to get. I don't think you'd have to be that familiar with the world to get it. It kind of just reads like a YA fantasy. It is technically a YA romance, but it didn't feel super romancy, because it's a lot of Clarion and her struggles being queen and this nightmare threat. The first like half of the book is them pining before they get together, and I wouldn't say I really felt that. I wasn't like, this yearning is so good. Maybe because they didn't spend that much time together. But once they were together, and I accepted like, okay, they're together now, I guess. Then all that very angsty, they can't be together, but they want to be, that worked much better for me. Like, why are they together? I don't know. I guess because they're two hot people who understand each other's position. They have a similar sense of duty in a position that's isolating. But when they were together, I was able to get on board. I thought the writing was nice. There was a lot of very pretty descriptions of Pixie Hollow. Maybe it's just me, but I felt like it could have been a little bit more whimsical. I think maybe because they're trying to age it up, like Tinkerbell is for kids, and this is a YA. Maybe the goal was to have this book be a little bit less whimsical and cutesy. There's more politics and talk of responsibility and romance. But I don't know, I like the whimsy. I wouldn't have minded more fun details. Like the pixie dust tree blooming when Clarion's in love. I thought that was really cute. But the magic in this book, to me, felt a little bit more superpower-y. Undefined, generic magic to defeat these monsters. But part of what I like about the Disney Fairies franchise is there's a lot of very creative, very specific uses of magic. Also, Allison Saft said in a blog post that she kept forgetting that the fairies were 6 inches tall. But honestly, the most difficult part was remembering that these characters are 6 inches tall. I constantly had to be on the lookout for characters holding something that would realistically be 10 times their size. So one thing about me is that I love that fairies are small. That's probably my favorite part about fairies. They don't even need to fly. These new romance fairies that are just human-sized, don't care. I like a small fairy. And I feel like the Tinkerbell franchise really plays with scale a lot. They really draw attention to the fairies' size with repurposed human objects that are way bigger than them, and the scale of things in the setting, like animals are way bigger than them, flowers are way bigger than them. There was a little bit of that in this book, and nothing felt incorrect. Like, I think whatever editor she had kept an eye out for that. But when I was reading it, I felt like it didn't matter that they were small. It's not really called attention to, and I'd go stretches of the book where I forgot that they were not human-sized. So when I saw that she said that, I was like, oh my god, I felt like that's what was happening. To be fair, this is not Allison Saft's world. She's like coming into this already established world. I get it, but it was funny to have confirmation. She also said that her first draft was way too melancholy. Which I wouldn't have minded, especially because we know that this couple eventually gets their happily ever after. It kind of wouldn't have mattered to me if this book was really sad, because I know they're going to be okay. It's not like if it was a standalone book that's really sad. That last chunk was pretty angsty, but I've seen people online say that they cried reading it. And I'm like, am I just a heartless shrew? Like, it wasn't that sad. And then I also felt like it could have been more angsty in the sense that they're star-crossed lovers, they're fated to not be together, they're doomed to be apart. But I was sort of unsatisfied because part of the point of this book is that we're setting up why Clarion felt the need to make the rule that you can't cross into winter. We already knew it was because Milori hurt his wing and now he can't fly, but I thought this book was going to provide more context to make it more sad. There was going to be this context that gave further justification as to why Clarion made this kind of dumb decision. Because the point is that it's an unreasonable ban based on Clarion's extreme emotions. But I'm reading the book and I'm like, I think Clarion's just upset that she caught feelings at all. This is a good relationship. It seems to be going well. They have to keep secret from Elvina, but like, why? You know? What's Elvina gonna do to them? Lock Clarion in her room with more guards? She's gonna be queen in like a month, and then Elvina's gonna die. Clarion can do whatever she wants. That's what it means to be a magical queen. All of this teenager sneaking around secret boyfriend felt a little bit silly when you know that she's gonna be the all-powerful forever ruler of Pixie Hollow in like 2 weeks. Clarion crossing the border was going fine. Milori was permanently disabled when he crossed the border, but it was for an extremely justified life or death situation, and he doesn't feel bad about it at all. He agrees to the ban, even though it's kind of dumb, because he's a chivalrous, respectful king. Not king as in actual king as in the slang term. I don't know, I read it and I was like, this situation wasn't that bad. I expected the catalyst for the ban to be worse. Maybe I just wanted more drama and more angst. I'm like, this wasn't sad enough. I was promised sad. In other news, there were lesbians. That was very exciting for me. I thought the pacing of that subplot was really good. We got constant little details and updates of Petra and Artemis. It was very cute. I also want to say, I was expecting Disney to take the opportunity to fix the retcon about the Minister of Winter. I thought we'd get some mention of her, some explanation. We did not. So here's what I would have done. I would have had Clarion appoint an honorary Minister of Winter. Milori is the Lord of Winter. He's in charge of Winter, the realm, but he can't cross over the border to meet with Clarion. And also, Clarion is too sad, so she doesn't want to meet with him. So we appoint some lady to communicate with Winter, and she gives Clarion updates on how the preparations for the season are going. She can't actually be from Winter because she's living in the warm seasons and communicating with Queen Clarion. So maybe she was just some warm weather fairy who volunteered for this role. But then we could explain how there was a random winter minister lady in the warm seasons in the first Tinkerbell movie who was then never seen again. I mean, this is a book for the now grown-up fans of the Tinkerbell franchise. I think a detail like that would have been cute. But I think they're just never going to acknowledge her and never acknowledge that they completely changed the lore of their franchise. Even though there's like no way to hide it, because if you watch the Tinkerbell movies in order, you're going to see that they changed it. It's not a secret. And then the last thing that I want to talk about is the physical book and the physical objects associated with it. That was a weird way to say it. There was a pre-order campaign for this book. I did not know about this. I don't follow Allison Saft on social media. When the Bleak Watch book came out, there wasn't any press for that, so I don't know, I kind of assumed there wasn't going to be press for this book. I pre-ordered the book, and then I didn't think anything of it. But apparently, I could have submitted my receipt and gotten a pixie dust blue nail polish, a signed book plate, and I also could have signed up to get a personalized signed copy. Which, this is the collector mentality in me. I mean, you know. I'm like, there's niche Pixie Hollow merch, and I don't have it? This is the standard hardback. There's also a UK paperback that uses a darker blue and has a lot more shiny gold elements on the cover. That's really pretty. I am thinking, like, do I need the UK paperback? No. Why would you need a second copy of this book? And there's a Barnes & Noble special edition, which is purple and has special end papers. I actually don't love the purple because I do think of Winter and Pixie Hollow as being this sort of light blue color. The blue and the gold feels like the colors of Clarion and Milori versus the purple just feels like a recolor for no reason. And then I also discovered that there were PR boxes. So some creators got a PR box that had the book, glitter freckles, Wings of Starlight branded matches that say a forbidden match on them, a Pixie Hollow / Winter Woods candle, and soap. And it seems like there was either Queen Clarion soap or Lord Milori soap. Guys, how do I start getting PR? Do I have to start posting on Instagram? Is this like a short form content situation? 'Cause I'll do it. What would you want me to post? Let me know. 'Cause some of the people who got this PR didn't even have that many followers. And like, I have a good chunk of YouTube subscribers, but I haven't tried to build up any other platforms. I feel like I could have been a candidate for this, you know? I'm so jealous. Pixie Hollow is like my thing. And I'm like an influencer, kind of. If there's more Disney Fairies PR in the future, I want to get it. I want it so bad. I just need to be more strategic. Other than me whining just now, I hope you enjoyed this video. I'm always going to be excited when new Disney Fairy stuff comes out. And this book was really fun to talk about. If you enjoyed this video, you can subscribe. I'm Sarah Seraph on all social media, and I'm gonna start being an influencer, I guess, so follow me, I don't know. And as always, all of the sources that I used are in a Google Doc linked in the description. Well, I don't know how to end a YouTube video, so bye! I'm kind of joking, but I am also serious.